Hello everyone, it's Olive from St Mary's here to tell you another story from the Bible. First, I want you to think, do you have a special friend? Someone that you get on really well with, someone that you like being with, when you're allowed, of course. Well, I'm going to tell you today about Jesus and his special friends. Do you remember last week, Catherine told us about some of them? She told us about the fishermen. Their names were Peter and Andrew and James and John. And when Jesus called them to come and be with him, they left their boats and their fishing and they followed him. And the friends were called disciples. And Jesus had 12 special friends who were called disciples. And our story today is about one of them. He was an important man with a very important job. This man was very clever at arithmetic and sums, and he could write. His name was Matthew. And nowadays we would call him an accountant. Well, what was Matthew's good job? The Romans made the people pay taxes to keep up the roads in the country and other things that they did for the people. And the Romans made clever accountants collect this money for them. Matthew had to work out what everybody owed, and then he had to collect the money. The worst thing was that the Romans didn't pay these accountants to do it. They told them to get money by overcharging the people. And this meant that the tax collectors were often very greedy and mean, and the poor people hated them. They didn't let anybody make an excuse for not bringing the money, even if they couldn't afford to pay. And Matthew was like that. He would sit at a table and people would have to queue up to pay, and the Romans would keep an eye to make sure they did. But being rich and clever didn't make Matthew happy. He really only had friends among other tax collectors. Most of his neighbours disliked him because they knew that he cheated them. One day, everyone was talking about Jesus being in the town. The stories had gone around that Jesus was a good man who did miracles and healed people. And he told wonderful stories and taught the people about God. Well, Matthew didn't bother to go and listen to Jesus. He thought Jesus would be like other people who hadn't got much time for him. So imagine his surprise when Jesus stopped by his table and said, "Matthew, come and follow me." Just like that. Matthew was amazed. But he didn't take long to think about it. He decided then and there to give up his old job, his wealth, his power, his tax collecting, and become Jesus' friend and follower. Before they left the town, Matthew gave a party in honour of Jesus, and he invited all his fellow tax collectors to come and meet Jesus and listen to him. And I'm sure Jesus talked to them about their cheating and that God expected them to be honest. Some of the religious leaders weren't pleased. They thought that Jesus should only choose good, honest people to be his special friends. Why does he dine with people like that, they said. Jesus knew what they were thinking, and he said, you don't go to a doctor if you're perfectly well. I have come to love and help people who know that they do wrong. From that moment on, Matthew went around with Jesus. He listened to all the stories that Jesus told. He saw the miracles that Jesus did. He probably talked to Jesus' mother and heard the stories about how Jesus was born and how those kings came from the east when he was a small child. And at the end, he was there when Jesus was killed and died on the cross. And he saw him after he came back to life. And because he was a very clever writer, he wrote everything down for us to read. His book is the first one in the part of the Bible about Jesus, what we call the New Testament. We don't know much about what happened to Matthew when Jesus went back to heaven, except that he spent the rest of his life asking people to follow Jesus themselves. And do you know that book that Matthew wrote is one of the best-selling books in the whole world, part of the new part of the Bible, the New Testament, that's about Jesus and the early church. Let's just think about that story for a moment. Matthew was a changed man, wasn't he, after he met Jesus? He asked for God's forgiveness about the bad things he'd done in his former life. His cheating and his unkindness to poor people in not understanding how difficult it was for them to pay. But Jesus taught him to love and care for others, and he gave him hope and a purpose for the rest of his life. I'm going to say a prayer, and if you want to make it your prayer, you say Amen at the end. Dear God, thank you that you care for everyone, for the important or the unimportant, for the rich or the poor, for the young or the old, and that you can change people to be more like Jesus. Help us to be loving and caring, and give us hope for the future, like you changed Matthew. Amen. Well, goodbye, and I hope to see you next time, or perhaps around the village sometimes when you're out for walks. It's nice to say hello to each other, isn't it? God bless. Bye.